You stand on the deck of a wooden galleon, but the horizon offers no comfort. The wind carries the stench of stagnant water and rotting timber. Your stomach twists from the relentless heave of the ocean. Your boots are perpetually soaked, and your skin is raw from the sting of salt and sun. Forget the tales of glory and gold you heard back in the tavern. Here, in the middle of the Atlantic, you are trapped in a floating prison. The wood beneath your feet groans like a dying beast, and your only companions are rats and men driven mad by hunger. You look at your hands and see them cracked and bleeding from hauling rough hemp ropes. This is not an adventure. It is a slow, rhythmic descent into a living nightmare. Welcome to the age of exploration, where survival is the only prize that matters. You are standing on a cobblestone street in the year 1600. The air does not just smell like the sea. It smells like 1,000 years of decay. It is a thick, choking soup of rotting fish heads, raw sewage, and the metallic tang of old blood from the nearby slaughterhouses. You are shivering because your wool coat is thin and riddled with moth holes. Your stomach is a hollow, aching cave that has not seen a full meal in 3 days. Behind you, the city of London is a labyrinth of debt and disease. In front of you, the Thames River flows like a dark ribbon of oil, leading out to an ocean you have never seen but have heard of in whispers and nightmares. You are not here because you want to discover a new world. You are not here for the glory of the crown or the expansion of human knowledge. You are here because you are desperate. In this era, the dockside is the last stop for the forgotten. It is the place where men with empty pockets and heavy hearts go when every other door has been slammed in their faces. You look at the ships, their masts rising like skeletal fingers against the gray sky, and for a fleeting moment, they look like freedom. You are wrong. They are wooden cages, and you are about to walk right into one. To understand why you would ever set foot on one of these vessels, you have to understand the life you are leaving behind. Life in the city is a slow death. If you are a common laborer, you are lucky to earn a few pennies a day, barely enough to buy a loaf of stale bread and a corner of a flea-infested room. Debt is a shadow that follows you everywhere. If you owe money to the wrong person, you could spend the rest of your life in a debtor's prison, a place where you will likely die of typhus before you ever pay back a single florin. The sea offers an escape, or at least, that is what the man standing next to you says. This man is a crimp. That is his official title, though in reality he is a soul merchant. He is dressed in clothes that are just a little too fine for this part of town, and he speaks with a honeyed tongue that promises the world. He tells you about the East Indies. He talks of Spice Islands where the air smells like cinnamon and the beaches are lined with gold dust. He tells you that after one single voyage, you will return home a wealthy man. You will have enough coin to buy a manor house and never work a day again in your life. He holds out a heavy leather pouch, and you can hear the clink of silver inside. This is the advance, he says. It is yours the moment you sign the ship's articles. What he does not tell you is that this money is a trap. The moment you take it, you are in debt again. This is known as the dead horse. For the first several months of your voyage, you will be working for free. You will be sweating and bleeding in the middle of the ocean just to pay back the clothes on your back and the rotten food in your belly. But right now, with the cold wind biting at your ears, that silver looks like salvation. Maybe you are smarter than that. Maybe you refuse the silver and turn to walk away. But the dockside has other ways of claiming you. You step into a tavern, hoping to escape the rain. The room is warm, filled with the smell of roasting pork and cheap ale. A friendly man buys you a drink, then another. He laughs at your jokes and tells you stories of the high seas. You feel a sudden warmth in your chest. a sense of belonging you have not felt in years. You drain your mug, and as you set it down, you see something gleaming at the bottom. It is a shilling. Your heart drops. By accepting the drink, you have inadvertently accepted the king's shilling. In the eyes of the law, you have just enlisted. The friendly man is not a friend. He is a recruitment officer, and he has several large, silent men standing behind him with heavy wooden clubs. You try to protest, but your head is spinning. The ale was spiked with something bitter and strong. Before you can even stand up, the world goes dark. When you wake up, you are not in the tavern. You are in the hold of a ship. The ceiling is so low you cannot stand up straight. The air is thick with the smell of unwashed bodies and damp wood. The floor is slick with bilge water. You hear the heavy thud of a wooden hatch being locked above you. You are no longer a citizen. You are no longer a man with a name. You are a hand. You are property. This is the reality of recruitment in the age of exploration. It was rarely a choice made with a clear head. For many, it was a kidnapping. Press gangs would roam the streets of port towns, looking for able-bodied men. They did not care if you had a wife and children waiting at home. They did not care if you had never seen the ocean before. They needed bodies to man the ropes and pull the oars, and they would take them by force if necessary. They would grab you from the street, throw a sack over your head, and drag you to the docks while your family wondered why you never came home for dinner. You look around the dark hold and see other men in the same position. Some are weeping quietly. Others are staring at the wall with hollow eyes. These are your new brothers. Some are criminals who were given a choice between the gallows and the sea. Some are young boys, barely 12 years old, who were lured away with promises of adventure. All of you are now bound by a contract that you likely cannot even read. This contract, the ship's articles, is a terrifying document. It gives the captain absolute power over your life. He is the law, the judge, and the executioner once the ship leaves the sight of land. You have signed away your right to complain about the food, your right to rest when you are tired, and your right to refuse an order, no matter how dangerous it may be. If you try to run now, it is desertion. The penalty for desertion is death. As the ship begins to rock with the movement of the tide, you feel a deep, gnawing sense of regret. You remember the stories the crimp told you about the gold and the spices. You realize now that those stories were bait. The gold belongs to the investors back in London or Lisbon. The spices belong to the crown. You are just the engine that moves the cargo. You are the disposable parts of a vast, global machine that cares nothing for your survival. The sailors who have been at sea before call this life the wooden world. It is a world with its own language, its own cruel logic, and its own punishments. In the wooden world, your value is measured only by the strength of your back and your ability to stay on your feet when the world is upside down. You look at your hands, already red and raw from the cold, and realize that the horizon you once dreamed of is not a promise of freedom. It is a boundary. It is the edge of the world you knew, and you are moving toward it at 5 knots an hour. You hear a whistle blow from the deck above. It is a sharp, piercing sound that cuts through the gloom of the hold. A voice bellows for all new hands to get topside. You scramble up the narrow ladder, your muscles stiff and aching. As you emerge onto the deck, the light of the morning sun blinds you for a moment. When your eyes adjust, you see the massive scale of the vessel. Ropes as thick as your thigh snake across the deck. Sails as large as houses flap in the wind like the wings of a giant bird. The sailors are moving with a frantic, practiced energy, climbing the rigging and hauling on lines. The boatswain, a man with a face like weathered leather and a voice like grinding stones, walks toward you. He does not welcome you. He does not ask your name. He looks you up and down as if he is inspecting a piece of lumber. He tells you that from this moment on, your life belongs to the ship. He tells you that if you work hard, you might live to see land again. If you are lazy, he will make you wish you had died in the gutter where he found you. You look back at the dock, which is already shrinking in the distance. The city you hated, the debt that haunted you, the cold streets and the hunger, they all seem strangely beautiful now that they are out of reach. You want to shout, to tell them there has been a mistake, that you are not a sailor. But the wind catches the sails, and the ship groans as it leans into the waves. The journey has begun. You are heading into the unknown, fueled by lies and bound by debt, on a journey that will test the very limits of what a human being can endure. You reach out and grab a rope, the hemp scratching your palms. The wood beneath your feet vibrates with the power of the ocean. The lure of the horizon has finally caught you, and it will not let go until it has taken everything you have. This is not an adventure. This is a sentence. And as the shore disappears completely, you realize that the misery you have heard about is not just a story. It is your new reality. The air grows colder as the ship moves further into the channel. The familiar smells of the land are gone, replaced by the relentless, salt-heavy spray of the sea. You watch the veteran sailors, their movements fluid and certain despite the tilting deck. They do not look at the horizon with wonder. They look at it with a grim, practiced vigilance. They know what is coming. They know that the deception at the dock was only the first trial. The real misery is waiting just beyond the curve of the earth, in the dark water and the howling wind, where there are no taverns, no laws, and no mercy. You take a deep breath, the salt stinging your lungs. Your journey into the heart of the age of exploration has truly begun, and the price of your ticket was your very soul. You turn away from the empty sea and look toward the mast, waiting for the first command of many that will define the rest of your life. The trap has snapped shut, and the only way out is through the thousands of miles of water that now lie between you and the world you once called home. The deck shifts again, nearly knocking you off your feet. You grab the railing, your knuckles turning white. This is the last time you will ever feel steady on your feet for months, perhaps years. You are a sailor now, a ghost on a wooden world, driven by the greed of kings and the desperation of your own empty pockets. The horizon is no longer a dream. It is a wall, and you are sailing straight into it. Imagine you are ducking your head as you step off the main deck and descend the narrow, ladder-like stairs into the belly of the ship. The transition from the open air to the interior of a 16th century caravel is not just a change of scenery. It is a violent assault on your senses. The sunlight, which felt so harsh on your skin moments ago, is suddenly a distant memory, replaced by a thick, oppressive gloom. You are entering a world of permanent twilight, a place where the air is heavy enough to chew, and the ceiling is so low that you are forced into a permanent, painful hunch. This is the lower deck. This is where you will spend the vast majority of your life for the next several months, provided the ocean does not claim you first. The first thing that hits you is the smell. It is not just the salt of the sea or the scent of old wood. It is something much more primal and much more foul. Down here, the ventilation is non-existent. You are breathing the collective exhale of 100 men who have not bathed in weeks. You are breathing the stench of the bilge water, that toxic cocktail of leakage, vomit, urine, and spilled beer that collects at the very bottom of the hull. This black, stagnant sludge ferments in the dark, releasing gases that can literally knock a man unconscious if he lingers too long near the pump well. It smells of rot, of sulfur, and of a slow, damp decay that seems to seep into your very pores. You look around and try to find a place to stand, but there is nowhere to be upright. On a typical vessel of the age of exploration, the height between decks might be no more than 4 or 5 feet. Unless you are a child or a man of exceptionally small stature, you are living your life at a permanent tilt. Your neck aches. Your lower back begins to throb with a dull, insistent rhythm that will eventually become a constant companion. You learn to move with a crab-like scuttle, navigating the labyrinth of obstacles in the dark. And the obstacles are everywhere. You are not just sharing this space with your fellow sailors. You are sharing it with the ship's entire existence. There are massive, heavy coils of abrasive hemp rope that smell of pine tar. There are crates of iron shot and barrels of gunpowder, which you must pray never see a stray spark. There are enormous wooden casks filled with salted beef, hardtack, and water that is rapidly turning green with algae. Every square inch of the lower deck is a precious commodity. The ship is a puzzle, and you are just another piece of cargo to be shoved into the gaps. Think about the sheer density of human life in this space. A ship like the one you are on might be 90 feet long. A modern city bus is roughly 40 feet long. Now, imagine taking 2 of those buses, stripping out the seats, and forcing 50 or 60 men to live, eat, and sleep inside them for a year. You have no privacy. There is no such thing as a personal bubble. Every moment of your day is witnessed by dozens of eyes. You are never more than a few inches away from another human being. You can hear their every breath, their every groan, and the rhythmic grinding of their teeth in their sleep. When it comes time to rest, do not imagine a bed. In the early years of exploration, before Europeans adopted the hammock from the indigenous peoples of the Caribbean, you slept where you worked. You would find a patch of damp, splintered oak deck between 2 cannons and simply lie down. There is no mattress to soften the hard wood. There is no blanket to ward off the chill of the damp sea air. You might use a coil of rope as a pillow, or perhaps your own sea bag, which contains everything you own in the world. You lie there, feeling the vibration of the hull against your spine, and you listen. The sound is never ceasing. A wooden ship is a living, screaming entity. The massive oak timbers groan and shriek as they flex under the immense pressure of the ocean waves. Every time the ship rolls, the cargo shifts slightly, creating a low, rumbling thud that vibrates through the floor. Above you, the constant thunder of feet on the main deck and the whistling of the wind through the rigging create a cacophony that makes true silence impossible. It is a world of noise, a mechanical and elemental roar that wears down your sanity, hour by hour. In this darkness, you are also never alone in the biological sense. You are surrounded by a hidden army of stowaways. The rats are the masters of the lower decks. They are not the shy, scurrying creatures you might find in a barn. These are bold, starving mariners in their own right. They have no fear of you. They will scurry across your chest while you try to sleep, their tiny claws clicking on the wood. They will nibble at your fingernails, your hair, and your boots. If you have a small cut or a wound, they will find it. They are your constant rivals for the meager food rations you are given, and they are far better at navigating the ship than you are. Then there are the smaller guests. Your wool clothing, which is almost never washed and rarely even dry, becomes a mobile colony for lice and bedbugs. They live in the seams of your breeches and the folds of your shirt. They bite until your skin is a raw, red map of irritation. You scratch until you bleed, but there is no relief. The salt air and the constant dampness ensure that any scratch becomes an infection. Your body becomes a battlefield, and you are losing on every front. To make matters worse, the lower deck is often shared with live animals. To ensure that the officers have fresh meat, the ship might carry pigs, goats, or chickens. These animals are penned up in whatever corner can be found, adding their own waste and their own noise to the mix. The smell of the pigsty blends with the smell of the bilge and the smell of unwashed men, creating a biological soup that is a perfect breeding ground for disease. Typhus, which sailors called jail fever, spreads like wildfire in these cramped, filthy conditions. All it takes is one infected louse, one sick sailor, and the entire lower deck becomes a morgue. The dampness is perhaps the most insidious enemy of all. In the age of exploration, no ship was truly watertight. Water seeped through the deck seams above you. It sprayed through the gun ports. It rose from the bilge below. Your clothes were always heavy with moisture. Your skin was always clammy. This constant wetness led to a host of skin conditions and fungal infections that turned the simple act of walking or moving into a trial of pain. You lived in a state of perpetual rot, much like the ship itself. Why did men endure it? For some, it was the only way to escape a life of even greater misery on land. For others, it was the promise of a share of the loot, a chance to find a new world and come home a wealthy man. But as you lie there on the cold, vibrating wood, with a rat sniffing at your ear and the stench of the bilge clogging your throat, those dreams of gold seem very far away. You are not an explorer. You are a prisoner in a wooden box, tossed about by a disinterested ocean. The psychological toll of this claustrophobia cannot be overstated. You are trapped. There is nowhere to go. If you step outside, you are in the middle of a vast, empty wasteland of water. If you stay inside, you are buried alive in a crowded, stinking tomb. This sense of being trapped led to frequent outbursts of violence, to deep depressions, and to a peculiar kind of sea madness. The walls were always there, just a few inches from your face, closing in with every wave. You were living in a floating coffin, and every day was a struggle to remember what it felt like to stand up straight and breathe air that did not smell of death. This was the reality of the lower decks, the hidden, suffocating heart of the great age of discovery. You are hungry. It is a hollow, persistent ache that never truly leaves your midsection. On a ship in the middle of the Atlantic or the vast, terrifying blue of the Pacific, hunger is not just a feeling. It is a constant companion. You have been at sea for 3 months now, and the fresh fruit, the soft bread, and the live cattle brought on board at the start of the voyage are nothing but a distant, taunting memory. Now, your survival depends on what can be kept in a wooden barrel without rotting into a liquid sludge. You reach into your canvas bag and pull out your ration. This is a ship biscuit, also known as hardtack. To the uninitiated, it looks like a thick, pale cracker. To you, it is a piece of baked stone. It is made of nothing but flour and water, baked 4 or more times until every last drop of moisture has been hammered out of it. It has to be this way because moisture is the enemy of the sea. Moisture brings mold, and mold means the entire food supply could vanish in a week. So, you hold a piece of food that is quite literally hard enough to break your teeth if you are foolish enough to simply bite down. Before you eat, you perform a ritual that every sailor on this ship knows by heart. You take the hardtack and you tap it sharply against the edge of the wooden table. You are not checking its density. You are listening. You are waiting for the residents to vacate. These are the weevils, small black beetles with long snouts that love the flour as much as you do. When you tap the biscuit, you see them tumble out onto the table, tiny dark specks scurrying away from the vibration. Sometimes there are also the fat, white larvae of the grain moth, which the crew affectionately calls cold bargemen. If you are lucky, you can shake most of them out. If you are unlucky, or if it is dark, you simply stop looking. You learn to appreciate the extra protein they provide, even if the taste is bitter and the texture is a soft, nauseating pop against your tongue. You cannot just chew the stone. You have to soak it. You drop the hardtack into a bowl of what the cook calls soup, though it is mostly just greasy water. You wait for it to soften into a gray, gelatinous mush. This is your breakfast. This is your lunch. This is your dinner. Then comes the meat. It is called salt junk, and for good reason. It is beef or pork that has been submerged in brine so concentrated that it has turned the flesh into something resembling mahogany wood. When the barrel is opened, the smell hits you like a physical blow, a mixture of ancient salt and something metallic. The meat is often years old. There are stories among the crew of barrels being opened that were packed during wars that ended before you were born. The salt has preserved it, yes, but it has also turned the muscle fibers into iron. You can see the crystals of salt encrusted deep within the meat, glistening like diamonds in the dim light of the hold. You watch as the cook boils it for hours, but even after a full day in the pot, the meat remains tough. You have to use your knife to saw through it, and as you chew, your jaw muscles begin to ache. It is so salty that it makes your throat constrict, your body screaming for water. But water is its own kind of torture. You walk over to the water butt, the large cask where the ship's supply is kept. As you approach, you smell it. It smells like sulfur and rot. Because the water is stored in wooden barrels, it begins to grow things almost immediately. After a few weeks, a thick green slime develops on the surface. After a month, tiny red worms begin to swim in it. You have to hold a cloth over your mouth as you drink, using it as a primitive filter to catch the larger organisms. The water is thick, almost oily on your tongue, and it tastes of the stagnant pond where it was likely collected. This is why you prefer the beer or the grog. The alcohol kills some of the life inside the liquid, or at least makes you care less about the fact that you are drinking a miniature ecosystem. But all of this, the maggots, the salt, the slime, is nothing compared to the shadow that begins to fall over the ship after the 4th or 5th month away from land. It starts quietly. You notice that you are tired, not just the normal exhaustion of a long watch, but a heavy, soul-crushing fatigue that makes your limbs feel as though they are made of lead. You find yourself tripping over the lines. You find yourself wanting to lie down on the wet deck and never get up. Then the physical signs appear. You are sitting with your messmates when you notice a small purple spot on your shin. It looks like a bruise, but you do not remember hitting anything. Within days, your legs are covered in these dark blotches. Your skin becomes thin and fragile, like wet parchment. You go to eat your softened hardtack and you feel a strange sensation in your mouth. You reach up with your thumb and press against your front tooth. It moves. You push it again, and it wobbles freely in the socket. Your gums, once healthy and pink, have turned into a swollen, blackened mass of rotting tissue that grows up and over your teeth. The stench of your own breath becomes unbearable, the smell of decay rising from your own throat. This is the scurvy demon, and it is beginning to pull you apart from the inside out. The horror of scurvy is not just that it kills you, but how it kills you. Vitamin C is the glue that holds the human body together. It is essential for the production of collagen. Without it, your body literally begins to unmake itself. You are not just getting sick, you are disintegrating. The most terrifying part happens next. You have an old scar on your hand from a knife slip 3 years ago. It has been healed and white for a long time. But now, as the scurvy takes hold, You watch in disbelief as the scar begins to redden. The tissue softens. The wound, which has been closed for years, simply opens up again. It is as if your body has forgotten how to be whole. Old broken bones that knitted together decades ago begin to snap and come apart at the sight of the original fracture. The internal structures that support your organs begin to fail. You lie in your hammock, listening to the groans of the other men. You are all rotting together in the dark. You feel a strange, intense longing, a psychological side effect of the disease known as nostalgia. You dream of green fields. You dream of the smell of crushed grass and the tart, sharp burst of a lemon. You would give every coin you have ever earned for a single piece of fruit, for something that grew in the earth and felt the sun. The ship's surgeon, a man who knows little more than you do about the true cause of this misery, tries to help. He gives you vinegar to drink. He tells you to exercise, to push through the pain, believing that laziness is the cause of the humors. He might even bleed you, opening a vein to let out the bad blood, not realizing that he is simply draining away the last of your strength. You watch as your friends are sewn into their hammocks with a heavy cannonball at their feet and slid over the side of the ship. They are the lucky ones. They do not have to feel the agony of their ribs detaching from their breastbones every time they take a breath. You live in a state of constant, low-grade terror. You look at your hands every morning to see if new spots have appeared. You check your teeth with your tongue every hour, praying they are still firm. You are a sailor in the age of discovery, and while the maps in the captain's cabin are being filled with new coastlines and exotic names, your world has shrunk to the size of a maggoty biscuit and the terrifying reality of your own crumbling body. You are starving in a world of salt, and the very air you breathe seems to be mocking your need for the simple, green things of the earth. Every meal is a gamble, and every day without fresh food is a step closer to the dark, silent death that waits in the hold. You realize now that the great voyages of history were not fueled by glory or gold, but by men who were willing to rot alive for the sake of a dry piece of bread and a chance to see the shore again. The misery of the belly is the true engine of exploration, and it is a heavy, grinding price to pay for a glimpse of the unknown. The scurvy demon is not a monster from a legend. It is the silent passenger on every ship, waiting for the lemons to run out and the long, slow decay to begin. You close your eyes and pray for land, not for the gold it might hold, but for the simple, life-giving juice of a single sour fruit. You feel the change in your marrow before you see it on the horizon. The air, which only weeks ago was thick and humid enough to drown a man standing up, has turned into a whetted blade. It slices through your threadbare wool shirt and finds the heat in your bones. You are no longer in the tropics. You have crossed an invisible line on the map, leaving the predictable trade winds behind and entering a realm where the world seems to have forgotten the existence of solid ground. You are entering the Roaring Forties. In the 16th and 17th centuries, the Southern Ocean was a place of myth and terror. It is the only place on Earth where the wind can chase its own tail around the globe without hitting a single continent to slow it down. It gathers speed for thousands of miles, building into a relentless, invisible force that will define every waking second of your life for the next month. This is the west wind drift. For you, a common sailor, it means that the ship beneath your feet is no longer a vessel of exploration. It has become a tiny wooden splinter trapped in a giant, churning washing machine. Look out over the railing if you can keep your footing. The sea is no longer blue. It has turned a bruised, metallic gray. The waves here are not the choppy whitecaps you saw in the Atlantic. They are what sailors call graybeards. These are massive, rolling hills of water, some of them 40 or 50 feet high, moving at 30 miles per hour. When one of these giants approaches from the stern, it looks like a mountain is falling on you. The ship's back rises up, and up until you are staring down a terrifying liquid precipice, and then you plummet. Your stomach stays at the top of the wave while your body drops 40 feet into the trough. The timber screams. Every joint in the ship groans as if the wood itself is being tortured on a rack. Then comes the wind. It does not just blow. It shrieks. It whistles through the standing rigging like 1,000 banshees. This is why they call them the Roaring Forties, and if you survive those, you will face the Furious 50s and the Screaming 60s. The sound is so loud you have to scream directly into your shipmate's ear just to tell him to pull a rope. But there is no time for talking. The captain has seen a squall line approaching, and that means you have to go up. Imagine looking up at the mainmast. It is swinging in a wild, dizzying arc against a sky the color of lead. The ropes are no longer soft hemp. They are coated in a thick layer of translucent ice. They are as stiff as iron bars and as slick as greased glass. You have to climb. You put your bare, cracked feet on the ratlins, feeling the ice bite into your skin. Your fingers are so cold they have lost all sensation, which is a mercy, because if you could feel them, you would feel the skin peeling away as you grip the frozen shrouds. You reach the yardarm, 100 feet above the churning chaos of the deck. You are balanced on a single foot rope that is dancing and whipping in the gale. This is where the old saying comes from, one hand for the ship and one hand for yourself. But today, the sail is wet and frozen. It is as heavy as a sheet of lead and as stiff as a board. It takes both hands and every ounce of your strength to haul that canvas up and tie it off. You are leaning over the yard, your chest pressed against the wood, while the wind tries to rip you off and toss you into the dark water below. If you fall, no one will stop. They cannot stop. The ship is moving too fast, and the sea is too violent. You would be a speck in the foam, gone before you could even scream a second time. When you finally scramble back down to the deck, your reward is not a warm bed. There is no such thing as a dry inch on this ship anymore. The waves are now constantly breaking over the bulwarks. This is what sailors call a green sea. It is not spray. It is tons of solid, freezing water slamming into the deck with the force of a runaway carriage. It sweeps anything not lashed down into the ocean. You spend your entire watch waist deep in water, your boots filled with freezing brine that has turned your toes a sickly, dead white. The salt is your constant enemy. It dries in your clothes, forming sharp crystals that act like sandpaper. Every time you move, your shirt collars and sleeve cuffs saw into your neck and wrists. These are sea sores, and they never heal because you are never dry. They fester and ooze, sticking your clothes to your skin. When you finally get 4 hours of sleep, you don't even bother taking off your boots or your wet wool coat. You just crawl into a damp hammock that is swinging so violently you have to tie yourself into it. You fall into a heavy, exhaustion-fueled stupor, only to be jolted awake 20 minutes later by the thumping of a boot on the deck above and the dreaded cry of all hands on deck. The ship is leaking now. The constant pounding of the waves has started to work the oakum out of the seams between the planks. You can hear the water rushing into the hold. So, instead of sleeping, you are sent to the pumps. This is the most soul-crushing labor on the ship. You stand in a line, grasping the long iron handles of the pump, moving them up and down, for hours on end. It is a rhythmic, mind-numbing torture. Your back feels like it is being pierced by hot needles. Your palms are a mass of broken blisters, but you cannot stop. If the pumps stop, the ship gets heavier. If the ship gets heavier, it rides lower. If it rides lower, The next graybeard will not just wash over the deck. It will push the ship straight down to the bottom. In the middle of this nightmare, the food situation turns from grim to impossible. You cannot light a fire in the galley when the ship is tossing like this, so there is no hot pea soup or salted beef. You eat your hardtack dry or you don't eat at all. You find yourself chewing on a piece of biscuit in the dark, and you feel something move against your tongue. It is a weevil or perhaps a maggot. You swallow it anyway. You need the protein. You need the calories to keep your heart beating in the cold. The nights are the worst. In the Southern Ocean, the darkness is absolute. There are no lights from a distant shore, no moon behind the thick blanket of storm clouds. You are rushing through a void at 10 knots, blind and praying that there isn't a stray iceberg drifting in your path. These icebergs are the ghosts of the South. They are silent, massive, and capable of peeling a wooden ship open like a tin can. You stand on the bow as a lookout, your eyes straining against the stinging sleet, looking for the faint, ghostly glow of white ice in the blackness. The wind chill is now well below freezing, and your breath comes out in ragged puffs of steam. You realize, with a sudden, sinking clarity, that you are thousands of miles from the nearest human being who is not on this ship. If you hit something, if the hull gives way, you will die in water so cold it will stop your heart in less than 3 minutes. As you round the Great Cape, whether it is the Cape of Good Hope or the dreaded Cape Horn, the ocean reaches a final, terrifying crescendo. The currents from 2 different oceans collide here, creating a chaotic jumble of water that defies all logic. The waves come from 3 directions at once. The ship is no longer rolling, it is twisting. You hear a sound like a gunshot, loud and sharp. The foremast has snapped. The heavy timber, along with hundreds of square yards of canvas and miles of rope, crashes down onto the deck, crushing a man you shared a drink with only yesterday. There is no time to mourn. You grab an axe and start hacking at the wreckage. If you don't cut it loose, the fallen mast will act like an anchor, pulling the ship's side into the waves and capsizing you all. You hack at the ropes, the freezing spray blinding you, your breath coming in gasps. Finally, the wreckage drifts away into the foam. The ship rights itself, shivering like a wounded animal. You have survived the night. You have survived the roaring 40s. But as the sun rises, a pale, heatless disk in a gray sky, you look at your hands. They are scarred, blackened by frostbite, and shaking uncontrollably. You have survived the fury of the sea, but you are not the same man who left the harbor. The ocean has taken something from you that no amount of gold or spice can ever buy back. You are a ghost inhabiting a broken body, waiting for the wind to either carry you home or finally take you down into the deep. You have survived the storms and you have endured the rotting food, but now you must face the true source of terror on the high seas. It is not the crushing waves or the hidden reefs that keep you awake at night in your swaying hammock. It is the sound of a heavy footfall on the deck planks above your head. It is the sharp, sudden crack of a leather whip. It is the realization that while you are miles from any shore, you are living in a floating kingdom where one man is God, and his mercy is a rare and fickle thing. On a ship in the age of exploration, the social order is not held together by shared purpose or a sense of adventure. It is held together by fear. The wooden hull beneath your feet is a tiny, isolated world where the laws of the land no longer apply. In their place is the ship's articles, a set of rules so rigid and punishments so severe that they would make a common criminal in London or Lisbon tremble. You are trapped in a hierarchy designed to break your spirit and turn your body into a tool for the state or the merchant company that owns your life. At the top of this hierarchy sits the captain. You rarely see him, and when you do not look him in the eye. He is the ultimate authority, the judge, jury, and executioner. Beneath him are the officers and the midshipmen, many of whom are little more than children from wealthy families. Yet they hold the power to have you broken for a sideways glance. But it is the boatswain and his mates that you fear the most. They are the enforcers. They walk the decks with pieces of knotted rope called starters, which they use to strike any sailor they deem to be moving too slowly. If you are not hauling on a line with enough vigor, or if you hesitate for a second while climbing the rigging in a gale, the starter will find your back or your shoulders with a stinging, bruising force. But the starter is just a warning. The real nightmare begins when the entire crew is summoned to the waist of the ship for a formal punishment. You hear the call, "All hands to witness punishment," and your stomach drops. You join the line of silent, somber men, standing in a circle around a wooden grating that has been lashed upright against the side of the ship. The air is thick with tension. No one speaks. No one moves. You are all forced to watch because the goal of this ritual is not just to punish the individual, but to terrify the collective. The prisoner is brought forward. Perhaps it is a man you shared a meal with yesterday. His crime might have been something as small as talking back to an officer, or being found with a stolen bottle of watered-down rum. He is stripped to the waist and his wrists are tied to the grating, stretching his body taut. The boatswain steps forward and opens a red baize bag to reveal the instrument of his trade, the cat o' nine tails. You stare at it with a mixture of horror and fascination. It is a whip made of 9 knotted lengths of cord, often dipped in salt water to make them stiff and heavy. As the first blow falls, the sound is not a crack, but a dull, heavy thud. You see the man's body jerk as if hit by a physical weight. The first stroke leaves 9 red welts. By the 5th stroke, the skin begins to break. By the 12th, his back is a roadmap of raw, red meat. The salt in the air and the spray of the sea sting his open wounds, but the boatswain does not stop. He is required to deliver the full sentence, whether it be 25, 50, or 100 lashes. You watch as the blood begins to pool on the deck. It is a dark, slick mess that someone will have to scrub away later. The man being whipped might scream at first, but eventually, the pain becomes so intense that he falls into a shocked silence, his head hanging limp. The ship's surgeon stands nearby, not to stop the torture, but to ensure the man does not die before the sentence is finished. If he faints, they might stop, let him recover for a few days in the sick bay, and then bring him back to the grating to receive the remainder of his punishment. There is no escape from the debt of pain. Why such brutality? You wonder this as you stand there, your own back aching in sympathy. The answer is simple. A ship is a powder keg. You are dozens or hundreds of men packed into a space the size of a large house, suffering from hunger, disease, and exhaustion. If the crew decides to stop taking orders, the officers are outnumbered and helpless. The lash is the only thing that maintains the boundary between order and total chaos. It is a psychological war waged against you every single day. But there are worse things than the cat. If your crime is considered an act of cowardice or a serious theft from your fellow sailors, you might be forced to run the gauntlet. The entire crew is lined up in 2 rows, each man armed with a piece of knotted rope. You are forced to walk between them while they strike you repeatedly. It is a way of making the crew complicit in your punishment, turning brother against brother to ensure that no one feels safe enough to form a bond of rebellion. And then there is the most legendary and feared punishment of all, keel hauling. You pray you never have to witness this, let alone endure it. The victim is tied to a rope that passes under the ship from one side to the other. He is weighted down and thrown overboard, then dragged slowly under the hull. As you are pulled along the bottom of the ship, your body is scraped against thousands of razor-sharp barnacles that have grown on the wood. These shells act like jagged knives, flaying the skin from your chest, your face, and your limbs. If you do not drown from the sheer length of time you are held underwater, you may die later from the horrific infections that bloom in the shredded remains of your flesh. It is a punishment designed to break a man completely if it does not kill him outright. You live in a state of constant, low-level anxiety. You learn to read the moods of the officers like you read the clouds for a coming storm. You learn to stay silent, to keep your head down, and to find small ways to preserve your dignity in a system that wants to strip it away. You see men put in irons for days on end, shackled in the dark, damp holed with rats crawling over their legs, simply because they were too tired to perform a task to the captain's satisfaction. Sometimes the pressure becomes too much. You see it in the eyes of your shipmates, a flicker of something that isn't just fear, but a cold, hard resentment. This is the seed of mutiny. But mutiny is a gamble with the highest stakes imaginable. To take the ship is to become a pirate and an outlaw in the eyes of every nation on Earth. There is no going back. If you fail, the end is swift and public. You have seen the yellow flag hoisted on another ship in the harbor, the signal for a court-martial. You have seen the results of that trial. A man led out onto the deck with a noose around his neck, the other end of the rope passed over the yardarm of the mast. When the signal is given, a group of sailors, perhaps even his own friends, are forced to pull the rope, hoisting him into the air where he kicks and struggles until the life leaves him. His body is left to swing there for hours as a warning to everyone who looks toward the ship. The yardarm is the ultimate end of the line, a wooden finger pointing toward a sky that offers you no mercy. As you stand on the deck, the smell of salt and old blood in your nostrils, you realize that the ship is not just a vessel to carry you across the ocean. It is a machine of discipline. Every rope, every plank, and every rule is designed to keep you in your place. You are part of the machinery, and if you fail to turn as expected, the machine will grind you into nothing. You look out at the horizon, at the vast, empty blue, and for the first time, the ocean doesn't seem like the most dangerous thing out here. The most dangerous thing is the man holding the whip, and the system that tells him it is his right to use it. You are a sailor in the age of exploration, and your life is held together by the thin, fragile threads of obedience and the ever-present shadow of the noose. You stand at the railing, your fingers gripping the salt encrusted wood so hard your knuckles turn white. For weeks, your entire world has been a flat disk of gray and blue, a repetitive cycle of crashing waves and the endless, yawning horizon. Your eyes are dry and stinging from the salt spray, and your soul feels as thin as the tattered sails overhead. Then it happens, a change in the air. It is not the sharp, clean bite of the sea anymore. It is something heavy, sweet, and incredibly thick. It smells like damp earth, rotting leaves, and blooming flowers. It is the smell of life, and for a man who has lived on a diet of dry biscuit and despair, it is more intoxicating than the strongest rum. You hear the lookout scream from the crow's nest, his voice cracking with a mixture of disbelief and joy. Land. The word ripples through the ship like a shockwave. Men who could barely crawl an hour ago, men who were doubled over with the pains of scurvy or the lethargy of deep depression, are suddenly on their feet. They scramble to the side, peering toward the horizon where a thin, dark line breaks the shimmering heat of the waves. As you draw closer, that line transforms into a lush wall of emerald green. You see white sand that looks like crushed diamonds and the gentle sway of trees that look nothing like the oaks of home. You think to yourself that you have finally found it. You have reached the edge of the world and found paradise. You believe your trials are over. You could not be more wrong. As the anchor drops with a thunderous splash and the chain rattles out, the euphoria begins to shift into a different kind of tension. You are sent ashore in a small rowboat, the rhythmic splash of the oars the only sound in the quiet bay. When your boots finally hit the solid ground, the sensation is jarring. The earth does not move. It does not heave or roll. For a moment you feel dizzy, your sea legs betraying you as you stumble onto the sand. You want to kneel and kiss the dirt, but the heat stops you. The heat in these new lands is a physical weight. On the open ocean, the wind at least moves, providing a merciful coolness even under the tropical sun. Here, in the shelter of the trees, the air is a wet blanket. It clings to your skin, making every breath feel like you are inhaling hot steam. Within minutes, your linen shirt is soaked through with sweat, sticking to your ribs like a second, suffocating skin. The jungle is a wall of green, humming with a sound you do not recognize. It is the sound of millions of insects, a vibrating, high-pitched drone that never stops. You soon find that you are not the master of this new world. You are its prey. You do not see the enemy coming. It does not carry a sword or a musket. It comes on translucent wings, a tiny, whining shadow in the twilight. You swat at the mosquitoes, cursing them as a nuisance, unaware that their bite is a death sentence. To you, they are just bugs. To the history of your voyage, they are the harbingers of the harvest. Within days of landfall, the sickness begins to move through the crew. It starts with a simple chill. You might be standing in the blazing noon sun, helping to haul freshwater casks toward the shore, yet you are shivering so violently that your teeth chatter. You feel a deep, aching cold in your marrow that no fire can warm. Then comes the fire. Your blood feels like it is boiling. Your head throbs with a rhythmic, pulsing agony that makes even the gentle sound of the surf feel like a hammer blow to your skull. This is the fever. It might be yellow fever, or perhaps it is the ague we now call malaria. Whatever its name, it does not care about your rank or your courage. You watch your friends go down first. Their skin turns a sickly, jaundiced yellow, and their eyes go dark and cloudy. The ship, which was once your only refuge, becomes a floating infirmary. But there is no medicine here. Your surgeon talks of balancing the humors. He suggests bleeding you to let the bad air out, but as the silver bowl fills with your dark, sluggish blood, you only feel the life draining away faster. Then comes the symptom that will haunt your nightmares for as long as you live. The black vomit. It is the sign that your internal organs are failing, your stomach lining disintegrating into a dark, gritty sludge. When you hear that wet, retching sound from the next hammock in the dark of the hold, you know that man is already a ghost. You are surrounded by the lush, vibrant green of a new world. Yet the stench of death is stronger here than it ever was in the middle of the Atlantic. You came for gold and glory, but you are finding only a shallow grave in the sand. As the fever ravages the crew, you are forced to deal with the second great mystery of landfall. The people who already call this place home. You see them watching from the shadows of the giant ferns and the thick trunks of the trees. They are not the monsters with heads in their chests that the legends described back in the ports of Europe. They are people, and they look at you with a mixture of curiosity and profound caution. You approach them with a desperate combination of greed and terror. You are a representative of a king or a queen, dressed in heavy wool and clanking steel that is entirely ill-suited for this climate. You smell of old sweat, dried salt, and the rot of the ship. They, in contrast, move with a grace that makes you feel like a stumbling giant. You try to speak, but the words are useless. You use gestures, pointing to your mouth to signal hunger, or pointing to your throat to signal thirst. You offer them what you have: glass beads that catch the light, small mirrors that show them their own faces for the first time, and hawk bells that jingle with a silver sound. In return, they offer you fruits you do not recognize, pink and orange pulps that taste of things you have no names for. For a moment, there is a fragile peace. You think you might be able to trade your way to the riches you were promised. But even in these moments of peaceful exchange, a silent, invisible tragedy is unfolding. You are carrying stowaways that no one can see. Smallpox, measles, and the common flu are hitching a ride on your breath, your hands, and your filthy clothes. To these people, your arrival is not a discovery. It is the beginning of an apocalypse. They have no defenses against the microscopic invaders you have brought from the crowded, filthy streets of London or Lisbon. Within weeks of your departure, the villages you visited will be silenced. The people who traded you fruit and gold falling to the same invisible fires that are consuming your own crew. But the exchange of misery goes both ways. In the cramped, desperate encounters on the shore, a new sickness finds its way into your ranks. It is a slow, creeping rot that will follow you back across the ocean. In the years to come, they will call it the Great Pox or syphilis. It might start with a small sore, something you are tempted to ignore in your relief to finally be off the ship and in the company of others. But this gift from the new world will stay with you. It will hide in your nerves and your bones, eventually claiming your mind and leaving you a shell of a man long after you have retired from the sea. The land you thought would be your salvation has instead planted seeds of ruin within you. The work on shore is never-ending and brutal. You are tasked with felling massive, alien trees to repair the masts that were cracked in the Atlantic storms. You swing an axe in a humidity that wants to melt your very marrow, your lungs burning with every breath. You hunt for fresh water, only to find that the local streams are often teeming with parasites that will turn your bowels to water and leave you dehydrated and weeping in the dirt. Every step you take into the interior of this new country is a gamble. One scratch from a poisonous thorn can lead to a gangrenous infection that will require the surgeon's saw. One bite from a camouflaged snake can end your life in minutes of agonizing paralysis. The shore is not a refuge from the dangers of the sea. It is simply a different kind of battlefield, one where the enemy is often too small to see or too beautiful to fear until it is too late. When the time finally comes to weigh the anchor and leave this bitter harvest behind, the ship feels strangely empty. It is not because you have unloaded your cargo, but because so many of your brothers are left behind. They are buried in the shifting sands of the beach or under the heavy shade of the jungle canopy. You look back at the receding shoreline, that beautiful emerald trap, and you feel a profound sense of loss. You spent months praying for the sight of land, and now, as the sails catch the breeze and pull you back into the open ocean, you are praying for the cold, empty safety of the deep. You are a survivor, at least for today. But as you watch the green hills fade into the mist, you realize that you are carrying the new world with you. It is in the yellow tint of your eyes, the tremors in your hands, and the dark memories of the men you left behind. The horizon is calling once again, but it offers no promises of comfort. It only offers the next stage of your long, miserable journey. The anchor comes up one last time with a heavy, rhythmic clanking that seems to echo the beating of your own exhausted heart. You are turning back. The prow of the ship, once pointed toward the mysteries of the horizon, now swivels toward the setting sun, or perhaps toward the cold Atlantic, aimed finally at the place you once called home. You might expect a surge of joy, a celebration among the men, or a sense of triumph as the hold beneath your feet groans with the weight of peppercorns, cloves, or perhaps bars of silver. But there is no cheering. There is only a grim, hollow silence that settles over the deck like a fog. As you step below deck to find your place in the crew quarters, the reality of the voyage hits you with more force than a rogue wave. You look around the berth deck, and your eyes find the gaps. It is the empty spaces that tell the story now. Where there was once a dense, sweating thicket of hammocks, there is now a cavernous, echoing void. You see the hook where your friend, the one who shared his moldy hardtack with you 3 months ago, used to hang his bed. The hook is still there, rusted and cold, but the hammock is gone, sewn around his cold body and slid into the deep weeks ago. You walk further into the shadows, and the tally continues. You remember the boisterous laughter of the young boy from your village who thought this would be a grand adventure. His spot is empty. You remember the veteran bosun who knew every knot and every cloud formation. His spot is empty too. On a typical voyage of exploration, you might look around and realize that for every 3 men who set out with such high hopes from the docks of Lisbon or London, only one is standing here now to make the trip back. You are the minority. You are the survivor, and in the dim light of the lantern, you feel less like a victor and more like a ghost that simply hasn't realized it is dead yet. The ship itself is a dying creature. As you sail into the vastness of the return journey, you hear the wood screaming. It is not just the normal creaking of a vessel under sail. It is the sound of a hull that has been eaten from the inside out by teredo worms, those silent, wood-boring mollusks of the tropical seas. They have riddled the oak and pine with thousands of tiny, honeycomb tunnels, turning the solid protection of your world into something as fragile as lace. You can hear them if you put your ear to the timber, a soft, sickening rasping sound as they consume the very thing keeping you afloat. The pumps never stop now, because the ship is so ravaged. The water seeps in through 1,000 microscopic wounds. You and your remaining crewmates take turns at the crank, hour after hour, until your palms are a mass of raw, weeping blisters and your shoulders feel as though they have been fused into solid stone. You are pumping the ocean out of your home just to stay alive for 1 more hour, 1 more day. The water that comes up from the bilge is a black, putrid sludge, smelling of rot and ancient death, and it splashes over your bare feet, a constant reminder that the sea is trying to reclaim the stolen treasures in your hold. And what of that treasure? You are sitting on a fortune that could buy 12 estates, yet you are starving. The irony is a bitter pill to swallow. Beneath the floorboards, there are sacks of spices that are worth their weight in gold in the markets of Europe. There is silk that would feel like a cloud against the skin of a queen. But you cannot eat cloves. You cannot drink the perfume of the East. Your rations have dwindled to almost nothing. The water barrels are now filled with a green, slimy liquid that you have to strain through your teeth to keep from swallowing the wriggling maggots that call it home. The scurvy, which you thought you had escaped when you made landfall, begins its slow, agonizing return. Your body, deprived of anything fresh for months on end, begins to literally fall apart. It starts with the exhaustion, a weariness so profound that your limbs feel like they are made of lead. Then your gums begin to swell and darken, turning a bruised purple. You reach into your mouth and feel a tooth wobble. With a gentle tug, it comes out in your hand, followed by a trickle of foul-smelling blood. The most terrifying part is the way the past comes back to haunt your physical body. Scurvy prevents the body from producing collagen, the glue that holds a human being together. You feel a dull ache in your shin, and you realize that an old break from your childhood, a bone that had been healed for 20 years, is beginning to unknit itself. The old scars on your back and arms, wounds from years of hard labor or distant battles, begin to soften and turn into open sores once again. You are literally dissolving. You are a collection of old injuries and failing systems, held together only by the desperate hope of seeing land before your heart simply gives up. The psychological toll is perhaps even heavier than the physical decay. On the journey out, there was the fuel of curiosity and the glimmer of greed. On the journey back, there is only the grind. You have seen the wonders of the world, and they were stained with blood and filth. You have seen the shores of the Americas or the Spice Islands of the Indies, and you have realized that the maps do not show the cost of getting there. You find yourself staring out at the horizon for hours, your mind wandering to a home that feels like a dream. Do you even remember the face of your mother? Would your wife recognize the gaunt, toothless specter that you have become? The weather turns as you cross the mid-Atlantic. The heat of the tropics gives way to the biting, damp cold of the north. You have no dry clothes left. Everything you own is saturated with salt and dampness, causing a constant, agonizing itch that turns into sea sores wherever your rags rub against your skin. A storm rolls in, a towering wall of gray and black that tosses your weakened ship like a toy. You are forced to climb the rigging, your frozen fingers clutching at icy ropes that feel like iron bars. If you fall, no one will stop for you. There is no such thing as a rescue at sea in this age. You would simply vanish into the foam, another name to be struck from the ledger. As the weeks turn into months, the crew becomes even thinner. You wake up one morning to find the man in the hammock next to you has died in his sleep. You are so tired, so drained of emotion, that you don't even mourn him. You and another man simply tip him over the side. You watch his body hit the gray water and sink instantly, weighed down by the heavy salt of his own clothing. There is no prayer, no ceremony. There is only the wind and the relentless movement of the ship. Then, one afternoon, the color of the water changes. The deep, terrifying blue of the abyss gives way to a pale, sandy green. A bird, a simple common gull, circles the mast and lets out a piercing cry. Land. You should feel a rush of adrenaline, but you are too weak to do more than lean against the rail and stare. When the white cliffs or the familiar green hills finally rise out of the mist, you realize the final, most cruel joke of the age of exploration. You sail into the harbor, the same harbor you left years ago. You see the people on the docks, dressed in their fine clothes, going about their daily lives as if the world has not changed. They look at your ship, a battered, rotting husk with tattered sails and a skeleton crew, and they see a miracle of commerce. They see the spices and the wealth. But as you step onto the solid earth, your legs buckling because the ground does not move the way you have learned to move, you realize you are a stranger. You have seen the edge of the world and the bottom of human misery. You walk through the streets of your hometown and you see the families of the men you left behind in the deep. How do you tell a mother that her son is a layer of silt on the ocean floor? How do you explain that he died for a handful of peppercorns? You go to the shipping office to collect your wages, the grand sum that was supposed to change your life. After the ship owner deducts the cost of the food you ate, the clothes you were issued, and the medical supplies that didn't save your friends, you are left with a few copper coins. It is barely enough to buy a suit of clothes and a few nights in a tavern. You sit in that tavern, your back to the wall, watching the young men boast and talk of the next expedition. They look at you, seeing only a scarred, quiet old man with a hitch in his gait and a hollow look in his eyes. They don't know that you are the ghost of their future. You have returned from the voyage, but you have realized that the man who left never truly came back. The price of the return voyage was not paid in gold or silver. It was paid in the very fabric of who you were. You are home, but the misery of the sea has become a part of you, a permanent shadow that no amount of sunlight or shore leave will ever truly wash away.